pulmonary arteries. So these pulmonary arteries, the right and left pulmonary arteries are taking the blood, which is deoxygenated blood, to the lungs. Then they dump the carbon dioxide in the lungs, pick up the oxygen, and then you have these two veins, which are the pulmonary veins. They are bringing the oxygenated blood to the left atrium. When the left atrium contracts, it pushes the blood through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood into the aorta. So the red color denotes oxygenated blood. The blue color denotes deoxygenated blood. So you have the oxygenated blood from the left ventricle going into the aorta. So the first branches from the ascending aorta, so this is the ascending aorta, are the right and the left coronary arteries that are supplying blood to the walls of the heart itself. So if you look at the heart, so this is the heart. So you have, this is the right side and this is the left side. So here you have the bicuspid valve and here you have the tricuspid valve. From here you have the aorta going. So this is the aorta, which is going from your left ventricle. From your right ventricle, you have the pulmonary trunk. So this is the pulmonary trunk. So this pulmonary trunk then gives out two branches. So these are the pulmonary arteries. So this is the pulmonary trunk. Then these two are the pulmonary arteries that are taking blood to the right lung and to the left lung. So then from the lung you have 4 blood vessels, which are the pulmonary veins. So these are the pulmonary veins that are bringing oxygenated blood from the lungs. So from lungs.
And that's the oxygenated blood?
Yeah, this is the oxygenated blood. This is the deoxygenated blood which is going to the lung. So the oxygenated blood is being brought to the left atrium. When the left atrium contracts, it pushes the blood into the left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood into this, which is the aorta, which is this structure over here, the red one. So if you look at the aorta, this is the ascending aorta, this region is the aortic arch, and then you have the aorta descending down. So this is the diaphragm. Where it descends down above the diaphragm, this is known as the thoracic aorta. And this is known as the abdominal aorta. And from these you have a number of branches going. So the first branch from the aorta, from the ascending aorta, is the left and right coronary arteries. So you have the left and right going to erase the pulmonary trunk. So, from this you have 3 branches. That are arising from the aortic arch. So this is the aortic arch. So this region is this is the ascending aorta, this is the aortic arch. The first one is known as the brachiocephalic trunk. The second branch, this is known as the left common carotid artery. And the third one, this branch is known as the left subclavian artery. So these are the 3 branches from the aortic arch. This brachiocephalic trunk, which is this branch, will then divide into 2 parts. So it will branch and divide into 2 parts. So this branch is the right common carotid artery. And this branch, which I'm going to draw, so this is the right subclavian artery. Then from the right subclavian artery, you have 3 branches that are going out. So this one is known as the vertebral artery. This one is known as the cervical artery, and this one is known as the costocervical arteries. So you have 3 branches from the subclavian artery, which are the vertebral artery. This is the right vertebral artery, right the thyrocervical artery, and right costocervical arteries. Then this branch, the subclavian artery, goes into your shoulder region, this region, and it becomes the axillary artery. So it becomes the axillary artery. Then it goes into your brachial region, which is your arm. It becomes the brachial artery. Then it goes below the cubital fossa, which is this region, and then it branches into 2. So it branches into 2. So the branch that goes towards the thumb, which is where you have the radius bone, this is known as the radial artery. The branch that goes this way towards the ulnar bone, it goes parallel along the ulnar bone, that is known as the ulnar artery. So both these arteries will go into your palm region and they join and form arches. So where they join, that is known as anastomose. So both these will anastomose and give rise to 2 arches. So this arch is known as the superficial palmar arch, and this arch is known as the deep palmar arch. And from the superficial arch, you have 5 arteries that go and supply blood to the fingers, and this is known as the digital arteries. So if you look at this, they are small branches, but I'm going over the major branches. So here you see the ascending aorta. This is the aortic arch, and you have these 3 branches. This is the brachiocephalic trunk. This is the left common carotid artery which goes to the neck, and this is the left subclavian artery. So the brachiocephalic trunk then gives out 2 branches. One is again going to the neck and up, which becomes the right carotid artery, and then you have the right subclavian artery. Then the subclavian artery, when it goes to the shoulder region, it becomes the axillary artery. So here you can see shoulder region, it becomes the axillary artery. It goes into the brachial region and it becomes the brachial artery. Then it goes down, and the antecubital fossa divides into 2 branches, so you have the radial artery and the ulnar artery. Then when it goes to the palms, those 2 join, giving rise to the superficial arch and the deep palmar arch. From the superficial arch, you have these arteries, which are the digital arteries. So on the left side, you have the left carotid artery and the left subclavian artery arising from the aortic arch itself. On the right side, they do not arise from the aortic arch. Instead, they branch from the brachiocephalic trunk. One branch becomes the right subclavian artery, and the other becomes the right common carotid artery. Then this aorta goes down, where it goes down into the thorax region. So this is the diaphragm. Above the diaphragm, this is known as the thoracic aorta. Once it goes below the diaphragm to this opening, which is known as the hiatus, it becomes the abdominal aorta. So you have a number of branches from the thoracic aorta. So if we look at the board, so I'm going to erase the heart. So here you have going down. So this is the diaphragm. So this is the hiatus, which is the opening in the diaphragm through which the aorta goes down. So this is the thoracic aorta. From the thoracic aorta, you have branches going out. So the thoracic aorta gives rise to a number of branches. So one will be the mediastinal artery. One will be the bronchial artery. One will be the pericardial artery. Then you have the intercostal arteries, a number of intercostal arteries. And then you have the superior phrenic artery that again supplies blood to the superior region of the diaphragm. So the mediastinal artery will supply blood to the middle region of the heart. Then you have the bronchial artery, the pericardial artery, the intercostal, and you will also have the esophageal artery. All these are arteries, but you cannot see it on the model because the heart and the lungs are there, so you cannot see those arteries, thoracic arteries. So when it comes to the lab, you won't be tested on the thoracic arteries because you cannot see it on the models. But then these arteries you will be tested on, all this. Then when it goes down and becomes the abdominal aorta, again it gives a number of branches. The first branch from the abdominal aorta is the inferior phrenic artery. So you have a pair of these inferior phrenic arteries which will supply blood to the inferior region of the diaphragm. Then you have the celiac trunk, and the celiac trunk, so here you have the phrenic artery, then you have the celiac trunk. So this is the celiac trunk. The celiac trunk will give out 3 branches. So if you look at the celiac trunk, it goes like this and it divides into 3 branches. One branch is known as the gastric artery that supplies blood to the stomach. One is known as the splenic artery that supplies blood to the spleen and the pancreas. And the third is known as the hepatic artery that supplies blood to the liver and the gallbladder. So this takes a right turn, it goes towards the right side and supplies blood to the liver and the gallbladder. The splenic will supply blood to the spleen and the pancreas. The gastric will supply blood to the stomach. Then you have 2 arteries that go out, and these are known as the suprarenal arteries, which will supply blood to the adrenal glands. Then you have 2 more branches that are going out, and these are known as the renal arteries that supply blood to the kidneys. Then you have another branch that lies, a single artery. So this, like a celiac trunk is a single artery, then this single artery is known as the superior mesenteric artery. And this superior mesenteric artery will supply blood to the small intestine and the proximal part of the large intestine. Then you have 2 arteries that go down, which are known as the gonadal arteries. So these are the gonadal arteries. So these gonadal arteries in females, they are known as the ovarian arteries, and in males they are known as the testicular arteries, and in females they are known as the ovarian arteries. They are supplying blood to testicles in males and ovaries in females.
Are those at the bottom that you're doing now, are those on the fat too? Or
I will go over it in a minute. So then you have another artery that splits again from the aorta, or a single artery, and this is known as the inferior mesenteric artery, and this is supplying blood to the distal region of the large intestine. So that is supplying blood to the distal region, and then you have three pairs of arteries that again arise from the abdominal aorta, and these are the lumbar arteries. So if we look it's much clearer than in this model. So here you can see the first two arteries. This is the phrenic inferior, the inferior phrenic arteries that are supplying blood to the diaphragm. Then you have the celiac trunk, which gives out three branches. The gastric artery, which supplies blood to the stomach. Then you have the splenic artery, which supplies blood to the spleen and the pancreas, and then one branch goes the other way, which is the hepatic artery, which supplies blood to the liver. Then you have this artery going over here, which is the suprarenal artery supplying blood to the adrenal glands. Then you have the renal artery that is supplying blood to the kidneys. So here you have the renal artery that is supplying blood to the kidneys. Then you will have, so here is the gonadal arteries that are supplying blood to the testicles and the ovaries. Then you have over here the inferior mesenteric artery, which is supplying blood to the large intestine, distal part of the large intestine. Then here you can see the lumbar arteries. They've shown only one artery, but actually there are three pairs on either side, which will make up the lumbar arteries. So first is the phrenic arteries. Then you have the celiac trunk, which gives rise to three branches: the gastric artery, the hepatic artery, and the splenic artery. Then you have the suprarenal artery, which supplies blood to the adrenal glands. Then you have the renal arteries, which supply blood to the kidneys. Then you have the superior mesenteric artery that supplies blood to the small intestine and the proximal portion of the large intestine. Then you have the gonadal arteries that will supply blood to the testicles and the ovaries. Then you have the inferior mesenteric arteries that will supply blood to the distal portion of the large intestine. And then you have the lumbar arteries that will supply blood to the abdominal wall of the body. So these are the various arteries that are present on the abdominal aorta. So this abdominal aorta then divides into two parts. So here you have the abdominal aorta. So this abdominal aorta, after the lumbar arteries, remember there are three pairs of this lumbar artery, it branches. Where it branches, this gives rise to the right and the left common iliac arteries. Then the left and right common iliac arteries will branch into two. So this is known as the internal iliac artery, and this is known as the external iliac artery. So the external iliac artery will pass through the obturator foramen, which is the opening in the renal pelvis. And then once it goes down, it becomes the femoral artery. Then it goes behind the knee and it becomes the popliteal artery. Then from the popliteal artery, you have two branches. One branch goes on the posterior side and one branch goes on the anterior side. So the branch that goes on the anterior side, this becomes the anterior tibial artery, and this becomes the posterior tibial artery. From the posterior tibial artery, you have a branch. And this branch is known as the fibular artery. Then this anterior tibial artery will go to your foot. And then it forms this arch on the anterior side of your foot. So these two arches, so these are known as the dorsalis pedis artery. And then this over here, this arch over here is known as the arcuate artery. And then from the arcuate artery, you have 5 branches, and these are known as the metatarsal arteries. So this is from the anterior tibial artery. The posterior tibial artery that goes behind, it goes to the sole of your foot. And that also forms an arch on the sole of your foot. And this is known as the medial and lateral plantar arteries. And then it forms the plantar arch. And from the plantar arch, you have 5 arteries, which are the digital arteries. So these are all the arteries. So if you look at this, here you can see the abdominal aorta is dividing into 2 branches. So this and this will be the right and left common iliac arteries. Then the right and left common iliac arteries will again branch into 2. This will be the external iliac artery, and this is the internal iliac artery. So the external iliac artery will go out of the obturator foramen, go into your thigh region, and it will become the femoral artery. Then it goes behind your knee, it becomes the popliteal artery. One branch comes in front and goes down, the other goes behind. So the branch that comes in front is the anterior tibial artery. The branch that goes behind on the posterior side becomes the posterior tibial artery. From the posterior tibial artery, you have a branch again, which is the fibular artery. from the anterior tibial artery. That artery goes all the way down to your foot. On the anterior side of your foot, it forms an arch. Where it forms an arch, where you have this tube forming an arch, those two are known as the dorsalis pedis artery. Then they form this arch, which gives rise to the arcuate artery. And from the arcuate artery, you have 5 branches, which are the metatarsal arteries. The posterior tibial artery also will go down on the sole of your foot, and it will form again an arch. So that is known as the plantar arteries. And then you have the plantar arch, from which you have 5 arteries emerging, which are the digital arteries. So these are the arteries that are present in your torso. So the left and right carotid artery, so you have the carotid artery that gives rise to 2 branches. So you have the internal carotid artery and you have the external carotid artery. The internal carotid artery will become the ophthalmic artery. But from your external carotid artery, it gives out a number of branches. So those branches include